Well, welcome. This is a live briefing that is part of NASPA's 100th anniversary celebration, and we're delighted that you are tuning in. Our topic is From Networks to Knowledge Communities. My name is David Zamoyski. I'm Assistant Dean of Students at Boston University and a former National Director of Knowledge Communities. I have two co-presenters with me today, Ellen Meets-DeKaney and Betty Simmons. Could you introduce yourselves, Ellen and Betty?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ellen Meets-DeKaney, as David said, and I currently serve as the National Director for Knowledge Communities for NASPA. And I also serve as the Assistant Vice President and Chief of Staff for the Division of Student Affairs at DePaul University. Betty.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, David and Ellen. My name is Betty Simmons. I am the Vice President of Student Development and Enrollment Management at County College of Morris, a community college in New Jersey. And I have the wonderful distinction of being the very first National Director of Knowledge Communities and actually transitioned from the Director of Networks to the National Knowledge Communities back 18 or so years ago.
And what we'd like to do today is really spend some time talking a bit about networks, the transition from networks to knowledge communities, and the growth of the Knowledge Communities program over the years. We've got a few slides, and my resources in developing content for the slides. Carrie Ellingson, the NASPA historian, has written a history of NASPA 2005-2017, which is a very useful resource for us. NASPA's website, which includes a 100th anniversary kind of online timeline, which is rich and something you should all visit, and annual conference program booklets over the years, which really contain a lot of information about networks and then knowledge communities, sponsored events over the years, and of course the knowledge of my co-presenters. So let me head first to some key dates, and the format for this program, really, Ellen and Betty and I are going to have a conversation and kind of reflect on our own experiences with the knowledge communities and in Betty's case, networks. And I'd like to start with 1981, and some research showed that NASPA informally launched a network in 1981, the Women's Network. It didn't at the time appear to be connected to a larger kind of entity within NASPA, and then the next year created a second network called the Small College Network. It wasn't until 7 years later that NASPA formally introduced the networks program. And let's see, 2 years later, two new networks were formed, and then 2 years later, one more, the International Education Network. So that leads me to a question for you, Betty. When did your involvement with networks begin?
So, David, my involvement with networks was just as a member, and when I joined the association in 1997, and in particular, I participated with the Women's Network, WISA as we came to know it, as well as with NEED, the Educational and Equity and Diversity Network. Those were the two that I greatly connected with, just as your general member.
And you were appointed Director of Networks in the late 90s?
In 2000, when Teresa Powell was taking the gavel as the NASPA board chair. We called them the president at the time. And I remember speaking with Teresa as we were leaving that conference and telling her, tell me what it is that I can do to support you in your leadership role. I'd like to get more involved with NASPA. And then several months after that chance meeting, she contacted me and in 2000 asked me to consider taking on the role of the National Director of Networks, which I very happily agreed to do, to continue what we knew then as networks and doing the work that the networks were doing.
Do you remember specifically why at the time NASPA was thinking about either sort of overhauling the networks program or planning to transform it into some other kind of experience?
Sure. I had the opportunity at that time to speak not just with Teresa, but also with Shannon Ellis, who was the outgoing board president, as well as Gwen Dungy, who was the executive director of NASPA. And all three individuals shared with me some of the conversations that were happening around the board table in terms of, we've got this structure with these networks. It was more of a social structure for folks with like type positions to come together and socialize with one another, and maybe also talk about some issues that were impacting their work. What the board was hoping is that we could take that structure and convert it over to this knowledge community structure and give the knowledge communities, former networks, the opportunity to really have a hand in helping NASPA identify research, potential best practices, do some investigating on issues that were relevant to our work, and bring that forth to the association, that would really be the vehicle for us to identify some of these issues that the association, from a much grander perspective, would be able to take responsibility for. So coming in, when Teresa and I met, it was to keep the networks running as they were. But then several months later, I got the call and was told, we're going in this new direction for knowledge communities. This is what they are about. Would you still be willing to lead this charge?
Was the director of networks position a NASPA board position back then?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Yes, it was. So no matter what, I was still going to be sitting on the NASPA national board.
So in doing a little research, when networks were launched in 1989, there were 9 of them. I'm going to advance to a slide which lists those 9. And it sounds like what the NASPA board was interested in doing was moving more from community to an experience that placed emphasis on the generation of knowledge.
Correct.
While keeping the community piece intact, because knowledge communities have community built into that name.
Exactly. And it was important, David, to your point, that we not lose that socialization, that networking, if you will, was critically important and remains critically important to NASPA. A lot of people come to our association meetings to network with others from across the country, now across the globe. So that piece we didn't want to lose. What we wanted to do was to build on the knowledge piece and have opportunities for more people to have input into the various issues that were affecting us, and doing it in a very methodical, very structured way, and contribute to the overall work of the association. So it was the knowledge piece that we were really focusing on building out.
And I happened to find the NASPA annual conference program booklet from 1995 in San Diego. And I think I saved it because that was the first time I presented at a NASPA national conference. And the networks that were listed in 1995 are here on the screen right now. It looks like over 6 years, the number of networks increased from 9 to 12.
Mm-hmm.
And looks like
yeah, and you can see those if you're looking at those from 1995. In some cases, they were very specific to the type of institution, the community colleges, the small colleges, the urban colleges. Some of them were very demographic related, individuals of color, and that's what the Educational Equity and Ethnic Diversity network was all about, pulling together folks from the African American, the Hispanic American at the time we called it, and the Asian American were all in one network. Young professionals, and at the one point we even had one seniors. So, they were varying in nature, which again speaks a little bit to what we still have today.
Mm-hmm. And then 6 years later, 2001, in Seattle, which looks to be the last year that we had networks at the annual conference.
Yes,
we were still at 12 networks, but there were some changes from the 1995 conference. And those changes, adult learners and commuter students had gone away. Urban colleges and universities had gone away, and graduate and professional student services was introduced, and information technology was introduced. So we kept it at number 12, but it looks like the network shifted a bit to perhaps reflect priorities of profession at the time.
Right, that's correct. And you're right, that was the last year that we had networks. I remember that conference so vividly because we were in the convention center, but we also did a lot of programming in various hotels in Seattle. And so I was coming in at that time as a new national director. I wore sneakers throughout the whole conference as I'm running all over Seattle to get to one network meeting and another to let them know about this new structure that the association was coming up with, and listening, because it was more of a listening. We're going to tell you what we're going to do, but we wanted to know how would this affect your network? What do you think will work? What are some of the areas that we needed to really focus on, and what this will mean? So we wanted people who were already involved in the networks to have a say, if you will, in how we structured what the ongoing whole concept of knowledge communities was going to be about, as well as tell them what the expectations were going to be for them, because we had to build those into the structure as well.
And then networks were launched, knowledge communities were launched over the course of the next year, because at the annual conference in 2002 in Boston, networks aren't referenced. It's all about knowledge communities. Mm-hmm. And here is the list of the sort of inaugural knowledge communities. And I was interested to see that it is in fact 12, and they were pretty much in alignment with the last networks.
Right, right. So, you know, again, when you're going from one structure to another, you don't automatically shut it down and then create something new. What we wanted to do was to give the networks an opportunity to help us in this process. So for all of them said, yes, we're gonna go on board with this. We're willing to make this transition happen. So going into Boston, that was a big part. We weren't going to undo what was already in place, but with the understanding that over time, things could potentially change. And I remember one of the biggest conversations was around the Network for Educational Equity and Ethnic Diversity, because you had all of those ethnic groups in one network. And, you know, once I met with the Asian folks and the Latino folks and the African Americans, there was a lot of angst as do we stay together or do we separate, because some of our issues and needs will be very specific to our ethnicity and our group. And so there was a lot of that discussion at the Boston conference, and then you'll see as we go on, you know, the network started to disappear because they just couldn't sustain themselves under the requirements that we had in place.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's really apparent from the listing of knowledge communities from March 2003 in St. Louis. We do have, for the first time, an African American KC, an Asian Pacific Islander KC, the Latina KC, mm-hmm. Native American KC.
Correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you know, a lot of the discussion around the board table, and I've said this to folks over the years as I hear more and more about what the KCs are doing, was how do we make this manageable? Mm-hmm. And there was at some point a resolution by the board that we would have no more than 11 or 12 knowledge communities. And you have to keep in mind, part of the requirement for the knowledge communities is that they had to contribute their knowledge at some point, whether through a regional or a national. So part of my time as the national director was also to work with the conference chair. Every knowledge community had the opportunity to submit 3 programs. So when you think of the NASPA conference and you have 11, 20, 30 knowledge communities and you think of 3 programs apiece, that adds up. And so we wanted to try to make that manageable. So we expanded and then we got smaller, and now we have what Ellen will tell you about what we currently have, which continues to blow my mind, but it also, for me, is very representative of an association that is very tuned into what is it that is affecting the work of our profession, and how do we generate information and knowledge and research about that. And that's exactly what the KCs were designed to do almost 18, 20 years ago.
And how focus changes over time.
Exactly.
And I see that we did move from 12 KCs in 2002 to 16 KCs. So that was the beginning of proliferation here.
Just the beginning.
A very good reason. Now, one quick question. When I got involved in the KC program, and it was a few years after this, we were using a tagline, Gateway to the Profession, Connection to the Association, which I had heard may have been Gwen Dungy's line, but perhaps it had emerged from KC leadership or National Director of KC. We used that line for a very, very long time, though, when talking about what KCs do. Do you know where that line came from? Gateway to the Profession and Connection to the Association.
My recollection is exactly yours. That I remember sitting around a board meeting and we were talking about the knowledge communities being the gateway to the profession. There were some assessments that NASPA did, surveying members to talk about the KCs and how they felt they were meeting their needs. And that's what we heard a lot from those survey results, that it really is a gateway to the profession for us, whether it's just to get involved, to network with folks, to find out more information. That's really what we were hoping the networks to transition to and become within the knowledge communities. And so I'm going to attribute it to Gwen. And I also think that Shannon Ellis as the outgoing and Teresa Powell as the incoming NASPA board chairs also saw it that way, especially Shannon. You know, she has authored so many books for the association and tackled a number of issues and used the KCs as platforms for some of that to happen. So definitely was demonstrating exactly, and many of the knowledge communities, I can think about some of them that have done some really good work, and they've used the KCs as that opportunity to do that.
And then in 2005, we were up to 17 KC. And then I'm going to jump 14 years to today, where we are now at, it's 35.
35, yes.
And I've got to tell you, I mean, when I was the National Director of Knowledge Communities, that was 2009 to 2011, I began my 2-year term with 22 KCs, and it seemed like really a lot to follow, a lot to manage. So I can only imagine what 35 is like. But can you say a few words about the kind of state of the program today?
Well, first, I'd like to say I think wearing sneakers at the annual conference, as Betty was saying, because running to those 35 meetings across the space is always very productive. But yes, trying to make sure we connect with all of them is wonderful. I guess I also want to say thanks to both of you, because I stand on your shoulders. I mean, and the other KC directors, national directors, and chairs came before me. So thank you. The program is, I think, in a strong place. I mean, Betty currently serves on the board with me, so you can chime in as well. But there are 35, and we have recently welcomed our newest knowledge community, which is on this list, which is off-campus and commuter student services. But I think that that's a reflection of the continued, again, needs of our members, where members see a need and don't see that there's a place for them to gather and talk to colleagues who are working on the same types of services or areas. And so it's important for, I think, this program to be able to be that place that a proposal can come forward and professionals can come together and not only create a community, but again, continue to create knowledge and share that knowledge with the membership and with their constituent group. Some of our other newest members over the last 2 years are the student government knowledge community, again, a group that did not see a place kind of in an association where they could come together. And so that's a need that NASPA is able to fill, as well as the civic engagement and democratic education knowledge community, the enrollment management knowledge community, and the interpersonal violence. It's our longest name. I'm sorry. Let me just find that. The sexual and relationship, violence prevention, education, and response knowledge community. That's just an example, again, of the needs that our members have seen over the last few years and the ways in which they have put forward, again, this proposal to create a new knowledge community to meet those needs. So I think the knowledge community is still the gateway to the profession, we like to say. And I think the ways in which it's meeting that idea of being a community and creating knowledge is very evident in the last board report in December of 2018. There were 121 scholarships, grants, and awards that were put forward. And that's, I guess, again, a reflection of the good work that's happening across the knowledge communities and the ways in which the knowledge communities are wanting to recognize that work, as well as support research and other professional opportunities for knowledge community members. I think that's kind of the place to begin. David, I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about the task force too that took place recently.
Sure. Well, I know that it was 2016 that a KC review task force was appointed. Betty served on the task force. I served on the task force. Pauline Dabrowski was the chair of the task force. And I know in 2017, we produced a fairly detailed report with a number of recommendations for the NASPA board. But we had some really thoughtful and deep conversations about the place of knowledge communities in or the association, the interface between knowledge communities and regions, and how we could make recommendations that would allow the program to operate, this sort of ever-expanding program, to operate as efficiently and effectively as possible to, engage members and generate knowledge and really lead involvement in a KC to be a really rich and rewarding professional development experience for NASPA members.
Yes, I think so. I mean, the task force was very timely, I think, especially since the program had been in place for 15 years at that point, had been knowledge communities, believe it or not. And so it was a good time to reflect. So it was wonderful that the various leaders, yourselves included, who were involved with the knowledge communities could really reflect on the program. And like you said, it was former national directors as well as regional representatives, knowledge community members. So very different perspectives of how the program was doing. And again, taking a good look at the current purpose, structure, and operation of the program to see what was going well and what could be further improved. And we did make some very good steps, I think. Pauline, as you said, led that task force, and then as she was leaving the role, handed those recommendations over in my role as I stepped in. But it's been great because I think there have been some really good improvements made to the program and some good acknowledgement of what's working well also. But some of those key things, like you said, were especially within the region. So it's always been one of those conversations, or it seems to have been. I mean, I've been involved with the knowledge communities directly since 2011, so not as long as both of you, but the conversation around the relationship between the regional representatives and the national chairs and vice versa has been ongoing. And so this was a way for us to address some of those and be more specific about structure. And so one of the recommendations that did come forward was that the regional representatives are now appointed by the national KC chairs, and their first I guess direct report is to the national KC chairs, and then they have the dotted line to the regions, to the regional KC coordinators.
So, I'm going to advance to the next slide, which is the leadership structure.
Okay, that would be helpful. I think so this structure, which also has been adjusted over the last year, you can see we have great support from the NASPA staff, particularly Stephanie King, who's the Director of Civic Learning and Knowledge Community Initiatives, who provides direct support to the knowledge communities and to the National Director of Knowledge Communities. We then have the board, of course. So you'll see the dotted lines here, and what the dotted lines mean. There is a representative that serves or as a liaison to the national knowledge, to the knowledge communities. You can see from the professional standards division and the public policy division, which is very helpful because it provides regular updates and interaction and ways for the knowledge communities to keep abreast of what's happening in those areas and how it applies to the work that they're doing in their particular knowledge communities. There's also then the dotted lines I was referring to as far as the regional KC coordinators and the regional representatives. So again, that is a very important relationship, but now the regional representatives work in tandem with the regional KC coordinators. But the regional KC coordinators are the liaison to the regional advisory boards. That's the recommendation, so that not all regional representatives serve on the advisory board. In some advisory boards, I will say as a caveat that they still serve. It's up to the regional director. But the recommendation from the board was that the regional representatives either serve as an extension of the regional advisory board or work with and in tandem with regional KC coordinators who provide kind of the information to the advisory board, and if there are any recommendations or requests from the regional representatives, they come through the regional KC coordinator.
And another reason for this is that every region has 2 regional KC coordinators or co-coordinators, right? I mean, when I was regional KC co-coordinator a long time ago, I think that we in Region 1 were the only region that had co-coordinators. Our regional director or regional vice president at the time thought as the number of KCs was expanding, it just made good sense to split the KCs between 2 regional co-coordinators, KC co-coordinators, so that we could give a lot more attention to our regional KC reps to ensure that they were, sort of feeling engaged within region, connected to the national KC, and producing knowledge for the region.
Yes, and that's exactly along the lines, David, of I think we must have heard you from the past, or maybe it was your voice in this report, but the idea that the recommendation that every region now has 2 KC coordinators for all of those reasons, that they can focus more on, one is they no longer have to focus on just recruiting regional representatives. That's the national KC chair and co-chair's role in collaboration with the regions, but that they can work on engagement of the representatives and also trying to meet the needs of the region with the regional representatives. So far so good. I mean, it's just our first year of this new structure, but we've already heard some great things from the regional KC coordinators about the ways in which they've expanded how they're working with and connecting with their regional representatives. So that's pretty exciting. I'm trying to think of other highlights around structure. I think one other piece I just wanted to highlight was that we have also, just with some of the logistics of quarterly reports, board reports, and things like that, have implemented some ways in which that we can ask the knowledge communities more directly about the tasks that they've been asked to accomplish and where they are in completing those tasks, just so we can have an ongoing conversation. Since part of the task force was around accountability, right? How, with this large of a program, with 35 knowledge communities, how to keep connection with each of those and make sure that they're able to achieve the tasks that they've been asked to achieve, since there are a lot of expectations around the knowledge communities. And so we've been able to do some of those pieces too, as well as asking them to develop their own strategic plans in relation to the NASPA strategic plan, and providing them more training and support in doing that as they're working through their own planning process. And we've also been able to provide them more online training modules. So with the online learning community, which is great for NASPA and it continues to grow, that's also a tool that we've been able to use to support the leadership of the knowledge communities.
And a fairly recent and I think really interesting development has occurred between the KCs and the NASPA Foundation.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You're in my mind, David.
Yes, that is important.
So, my role also right now for NASPA is to serve as the chair of the NASPA Foundation Board, which is the fundraising arm of the association. And we were approached several years ago by, in particular, the LAKC, the Latinx KC, about doing fundraising and then having the proceeds of that fundraising to be returned back to the KC so it could fund some of the activities and research that they were doing. And obviously, once you start having those conversations with one organization, there's another one that's not too far behind. So the NASPA Foundation Board, as you know, David, because you sit on the board with me, the NASPA Foundation Board just recently put together a proposal that will allow as many of the knowledge communities that are interested to do fundraising. A percentage of that will come back to the NASPA Foundation Board to contribute to the overall funds of our campaigns. But then to turn the money that they have raised to go back to the KC so that they can advance the work that they are doing and meeting the goals that are established from their advisory group.
Yes, which has been wonderful. Again, when we talk about those awards and the grants that I mentioned or scholarships, that this is one of the ways that they are supporting those initiatives, as well as kind of annual initiatives they may have for gatherings or other types of meetings at the annual conference, and some that have been in place for a very long time, and they've always had to kind of figure out funding along the way, and now we can further support those initiatives, which have been important to NASPA and to the constituent groups.
A wonderful development.
Yes. If I could just mention one other piece too, I think another part of the task force which was helpful, which is related to money, is around the knowledge community budget. So the knowledge communities received a certain amount of funding each, $1,000 a year for many years. And as a result of the task force, now there's a call to review that budget each year and see if there's ways to increase. So actually over the last year and this year, there has been an increase of $100 each year, which may not seem like a lot, but it is when, looking at either purchasing items for the annual conference or public publicity or other things the knowledge communities are doing. So an ongoing look at the budget to try and support the good work that's happening across these various groups.
Mm-hmm. When I was looking at the most recent NASPA board report online, I was struck by membership numbers of the knowledge communities. And I'm going to move to a slide that lists the membership of the 5 largest KCs. Mm-hmm. It's extraordinary. 2,600 members of WISA, which is really just brilliant. I mean, as NASPA's membership worldwide has grown, certainly we've seen a growth in membership numbers of our KCs. These KCs were in place when I was director of KCs, but we didn't have membership numbers, I think, like this. This is extraordinary, right?
Yes, I mean, it's amazing to look, and this is only, 5 of the 35, right? Even though they're the top 5, which is very nice to see. But you think about the numbers of members, and of course there's overlap. Some members, belong to more than one, but many are focused in one particular area or maybe 2 particular areas. So, it's nice to see that members are, again, parts of these communities are fun, seem to think that there's a place for them to connect, and it's important to connect to these communities within the membership.
I'm a proud member of all 35, and I just want to put out there to our NASPA members, membership is free. I mean, and you can join as many KCs as you would like. And it's very easy to join a KC. It's really entering your membership profile, right? Your online profile, and affiliating.
Is that a requirement, David? Because I'm a member of all 35 right now, but do I remain a member of all 35 now that I've served in this role? Patty, are you started?
You're a lifetime member of all of them, I think.
Well, I think the important piece of it as well, David, is, the knowledge that's generated. And so the information that is available on the NASPA website from all of these KCs, whether you're an official member or not, it's out there for the NASPA membership. And I know, for example, in my interim role here on campus, I've begun to use a little bit more of the student affairs working with academic affairs KC information, because it's just so helpful as I'm working between our academic areas. So not an official member of that KC, but the knowledge that's available, the information that's available is most helpful. So the website's got a lot of great information.
And I am going to kind of travel back to slide number 2 for a moment, the key dates slide, because this shows really over the years every national KC director has introduced innovations or new initiatives that have served to strengthen and grow the program. And 2006 was the first year that I could find in the annual conference program booklets that we had a knowledge community gala, which is really one of the largest events every year at the annual conference. In 2000, and so that would have been Judy's year, one of Judy's years as director. And in 2006, the national KC chairs and the regional KC coordinators were flown to Milwaukee for a few days of in-depth KC leadership training. I think that was the first year that was offered, and I was a regional KC coordinator at the time. Judy Alvin was the National Director of Knowledge Communities. She chaired this time together. If I remember, Joey DeSanto Jones was a new employee at NASPA, and he was there because part of his portfolio was to support the KCs, and it was really a nice experience and a chance to build a sense of team among the national KC chairs and the regional KC coordinators. And I think, Ellen, now the training occurs at the annual conference.
Yes, it is the Saturday before the conference begins, and then there's additional smaller trainings during the conference for regional KC representatives and coordinators, as well as the larger training that happens for the full day on Saturday. So, and then those training modules. There's about 4 training modules online that we ask new leaders to review before coming to the annual conference, so right after they're elected.
We introduced the annual KC publication in 2011, and it was really a way of KC's generating knowledge, but also a way of celebrating 10 years of KC's within NASPA. And I remember when I was National KC Director, Gwen Dungy would call me perhaps every other month for a check-in to see how things were going and to offer some thoughts and recommendations about work moving forward. And so often our conversations centered around what is the knowledge that the KCs are generating? What specifically are they putting out there to our members? What's the new knowledge? And in talking with Joey and Yvette Castillo-Clark, who followed me as National KC Director, we were thinking about what we could do that was sort of innovative, something that would put out to the NASPA membership in a really sort of visible way the good work of KCs. I think it was Yvette who said, "David, let's do a publication," and from there we talked with the national KC chairs and made it happen for the Philadelphia conference in 2011.
I remember writing for that publication, David, thanks to you.
that has continued, and we'll see one within a month or two, right?
Yes, we will. We're finishing the editing. And I think the other piece that is wonderful that's expanded on this is I actually was asked to be the first chair. So it was the national KC directors, right, and the NASPA staff who were managing this large publication on your own. And then I think the staff thought, maybe we should get some help. So I was asked to be the publications chair. I don't remember what year. It was probably 3 years after it started. And then now we have a publications chair and committee ever since then, which is great because it's members of knowledge communities or others who are interested in writing or being involved in a publication. It's about a team. It's a team of 10, which includes myself and the incoming national director to kind of give, in this case, Joel, information about how this happens, but also the NASPA staff. And so it is, I mean, it's 36 articles actually, because we include a public policy division article. So it's a lot of information within this one publication. So with the expansion of the publication that you began, which is wonderful, we've also expanded the support for it to get it done each year before the annual conference.
That's great. That's great. Well, I'm going to move forward now and just take a moment to acknowledge all of the national directors of knowledge communities since Betty in 2001, and there we are.
Been a great group of people.
And I do want to note, Betty, you had a 3-year term, and Judy had a 3-year term.
Yes.
And then it became a 2-year term. Could you say a little bit about why your term was 3 years?
Sure. And again, it has a lot to do with the transition that we were going through. So our terms, both Judy and mine, were supposed to be 2-year terms, much like they are now. But the board asked me to stay on the 1 additional year to continue that transformation, just to kind of shepherd that through, as well as think about early on who would replace me as a national director, so we could get that person on board with what it was that he or she would need to do. And that's exactly what we did. There was a bit there where Judy and I were kind of overlapping, and Judy was shadowing me as she was preparing to take on her role. And then, as you pointed out, in 2006, there were a lot more organizational pieces that needed to be put in place. And so they asked Judy to stay on for that additional year to shepherd that, to make sure that the KC chairs had all of the support that they needed as they were being asked to take on more. So it just made sense to do that 1 additional year for both of those transitional periods.
And Ellen, could you introduce your successor who will serve as national director from 2019 to 2021? Wow.
Yes, we're very excited. Joel Perez from Whittier College. He serves as the Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students, I believe, at Whittier College. So we have been working very closely over the last year as he's preparing to step in March 2019. Yes, 20. Just 2 months away.
Well, I think that is the content we had hoped to cover. Do you have any last thoughts to share with folks before we conclude?
You know, David, I often tell people I'm the grandmother of knowledge communities. and seeing that the generation has gone to 35 it is so powerful to know that the ideas of the board back in 1999, 2000 have grown, and we've got this amazing structure where we're allowing our members to have access to some really good information, as well as the networking opportunities. It continues to be mind-blowing to me to even think about managing all of those. So my hat goes off to all of you who had to do more than the 11 or 12 that was originally thought of. But I think that just says something about our association. And so it's just nice to see my little children grow up into these great adults that our knowledge communities have actually become.
And I would say it's great to be a part of the larger program now that you helped to build, Betty. And I think that it will be fun to watch what happens next as far as, you know, the needs of the association and the current knowledge communities we have. Whether there are some that, you know, may eventually, you know, not be as necessary as they were, and new ones that come forward as we move forward. So it'll be fun to watch.
Well, Ellen and Betty, it's been a joy to reflect on this program and our involvement with it. And thank you for your leadership, and thank you for joining us today. And I'll be seeing you both in Los Angeles at the annual conference in March.
Well, thank you very much, David, for allowing us to walk down memory lane on knowledge communities.
Yes, thank you.
Take care.